I'm Relika Roach, and welcome to the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, September 19th, 2018. At this time, I invite the Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, the Honorable Wycliffe Smith, to address you. Minister Smith.
Greetings to all gathered here this morning. Madam Prime Minister, Honorable Minister, Department of Communications, members of the press, as well as the listening and viewing audiences via radio, television, and social media. Good morning, Sualiga. The 2018 season for the St. Martin Volleyball Association Senior Games continues as at the Great Bay Sports Auditorium. I encourage you to go out and support the teams and the players. It is very important that we as a community encourage the players and that we also take part in sports. I urge people who are able to join any sporting team of their choice to assist or even sponsor a team because sports matter. Once again, that's the SIMFA Senior Games at the Great Bay Sports Auditorium. The matches promise to be exciting, so I'll see you there. Continuing with the Department of Sports, the Department of Sports wishes to recognize Akeem Lewis, who has been practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for the past 8 years. Mr. Lewis will be representing St. Martin in Curacao in October at the Mixed Martial Arts Competition. To Akeem, I say, keep up the great work that you've been doing. You are making a positive impact in the lives of your students, and by extension, you're also making a positive impact on our St. Martin community. The Department of Sports is calling on all sports organizations to please submit their nominee choices for this year's Brown Pelican Awards. These should be submitted no later than Friday, September 28th, 2018. The Brown Pelican Sports Awards categories for this year are Male Athlete of the Year, Female Athlete of the Year, Sports Icon, Best Overall Team, Best Coach, Best Sporting School, Sporting Innovations, Best Sponsor, International Ambassador, and Best Sports Organization. The sports organizations can submit their nominee choices by either accessing the nomination website on the Department of Sports SXM Facebook page, or by calling the Department of Sports on 542-6085 or 542-9344 to register their choices. This year's Brown Pelican Awards ceremony will be held at the Princess Port de Plaisance on November the 18th, 2018. This year's theme is boxing, and the ceremony will also be highlighting our local boxing legends on their outstanding contribution to this boxing sport here on the island. So we're now encouraging the general public to save the date, November 18th, and stay tuned to the Department of Sports SXM Facebook page for more information. As you may be aware, last Friday I made a presentation to Parliament with an update on the status of the education sector post-Hurricane Irma. In that presentation, I highlighted the status of the educational infrastructure, the current status of the teacher shortage, as well as steps taken by the sector to prepare for the current hurricane season. In error, my presentation included incorrect information related to the Foundation Catholic Education St. Martin. Whereas the information presented in Parliament highlighted one school, namely the Sister Regina School, as having 11 non-qualified teachers and several other teachers requiring exemptions, the presentation should have indicated that the Foundation Catholic Education St. Martin had a total of 7 teachers requiring exemption across its 6 schools. So on Monday, I visited the Sister Regina's primary school and apologized in person to the principal, Mrs. Beaton, the chairperson of the school board, Mr. Halley, and the acting superintendent for Catholic education, Mrs. Green. A letter concerning this matter is also on its way to the Chair of Parliament. When I return to the House of Parliament, I will state this amendment during my response to the questions posed by the members of Parliament. The Student Support Services Division will be hosting a free time management workshop entitled Making Your Time Count on Monday, September 24th, 2018, from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. This workshop is aimed at students in the last 2 years of secondary school and also students who have recently graduated. And it will be held at the Student Support Services Division office, which is located in the Amigo building across from the police station next to the Windward Islands Bank here in Phillipsburg. Students are urged to call the Student Support Services Division at telephone 543-1235 to register for this workshop as space is limited. The Education on the Move team, in collaboration with the St. Martin National Commission for UNESCO and Friends, hosted the St. Martin Literacy Week. The readathon was conducted from September 6th to September 14th, and unfortunately, Tropical Storm Isaac interrupted the readathon for 2 days. I've been told that schools, as well as the volunteers who didn't get to participate, are requesting that the program be extended with another 2 days in order to make up for the days that were lost due to Tropical Storm Isaac. With participation of all after-school community programs and the many volunteer readers, the program thus far was a success. And remember, readers are leaders. So drop everything and read with the DEAR or DEAR program. Education on the Move will continue its work to promote continued education and literacy here on St. Martin. Now a word about the Too Cool to Loot campaign. The Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sports, in collaboration with UNICEF Netherlands, is continuing the Too Cool to Loot campaign. This initiative is aimed at promoting hurricane preparedness and highlighting the negative effects and the consequences of looting. Looting is stealing during a time of disaster. This practice is illegal, and we want to ensure that our children understand this fully. The program coordinators will be visiting all elementary schools with My Cool Kid Hurricane kits to distribute to the students. I encourage all elementary school managers who have not already scheduled their visit to contact the campaign team via toocooltoloot@gmail.com and make your arrangements as soon as possible for the team to visit your school. And finally, a word concerning International Day of Peace. Each year, the International Day of Peace is observed around the world on September 21st. The General Assembly of the United Nations has declared this a day devoted to strengthening the ideals of peace, both within and among all nations and peoples. A peaceful society is one where there is justice and equality for everyone. On Friday, September 21st, let us intentionally do an extra act of kindness to promote peace in our community, peace on our jobs, peace in our homes, and peace amongst each other. We are our brother's keeper. We are St. Martin strong. We are overcoming together. Thank you for watching and for listening, and do have a pleasant day.
Thank you, Minister Smith, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Minister of Public Health, Social Development, and Labor, the Honorable Emma Lee, to address you. Minister Lee.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, colleague ministers, media, those listening by radio, television, or internet. I have two topics that I'd like to touch on today. I just returned from a ministerial forum in the city of in Panama City, Panama. So this was the 10th Ministerial Forum on Development of Latin America and the Caribbean under the theme, Partnership for the Reduction of Structural Inequalities under the Framework of the SDGs. So basically under the responsibility of social development, what is the rest of the Caribbean and what is the rest of Latin America doing in terms of how do we look for social equality in our different communities. This was arranged under the Ministry of Social Development by the Republic of Panama, as well as the United Nations Development Program, as well as the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. The objective of the conference was really to share best practices on public policies in the area of human social development, and to debate proposals that address the challenges of our different countries and what we're facing in terms of overcoming structural barriers that impede inclusive development. Topics such as social protection systems. And what I found was very interesting is that much of the conversation, or part of the conversations, also touched on the concept of universal health insurance. If you remember, one of the ideas behind universal health insurance is that you can access health insurance without causing financial duress. In other words, that if you have to sell your home, sell your car in order to finance your health care needs, that this is creating financial hardship, and as a community, as a society, that is something that we don't subscribe to. So it was good to see that the other countries are all working on a universal health insurance, just like St. Martin, that we are very far in the process of working on a universal health insurance scheme that ensures that everybody in our community has access to health insurance and access to quality health care close to home. So it was good to see that that also fits the goal of social development. If you are looking for financial stability, and if we're looking to elevate the most vulnerable in our community, that's an important part of it, making sure that people have access to health care and without causing financial hardship. One of the things that I found very interesting about the conference is when you listen to the different countries, when you look at what the issues are for, well, Venezuela was there, who of course has a whole host of issues, but Colombia, Peru, Panama, Mexico, and then of course there were Caribbean countries. There was the British Virgin Islands, Jamaica, St. Lucia, Grenada, and St. Martin as well. But when you listen in the conference what the issues are, for the larger countries, their issues are really so much different than our Caribbean countries, right? They have large millions of people in their population, and for them, getting the data to understand what's happening in their community, what pockets need help, they're in a different situation, and I think that's a point that the Caribbean countries banded together really and stressed that point. So in the conference, they're working on a draft document, a declaration explaining the objectives and the outcomes. And the Caribbean delegation, mostly at my prompting, we managed to add two paragraphs to the agreement. And I'll read them for you. Asserting that the facilitation of the exchange of information, technology, and lessons learned amongst the member countries is a prudent mechanism to innovate development policies considering the socioeconomic particularities of the Caribbean countries. Point being that Many of these other countries have developed resources. Unfortunately, software, things like that, very often policies are in Spanish, so we've asked that the UNDP or ECLAC also facilitate that these documents are translated into English so that other people can access their lessons learned and policies. But also, any technologies that are developed, if they believe that it has applications for Latin America or Caribbean, that they keep in mind that the Caribbean countries have a very particular socioeconomic condition. The second point is taking into account the principle of leaving no one behind. In other words, this is one of the core principles of the conference, is that in a society we shouldn't be leaving the vulnerable groups behind. In the same way, we stressed that the Latin countries shouldn't be leaving the Caribbean countries behind, because our economies are really very, very different. So taking that principle into account, the policies and implementation strategies for development must take into account the diverse socioeconomic realities of the member countries, particularly the vulnerable microeconomies of the Caribbean, whose economies have been strongly impacted by extreme weather conditions. So again, as you look at different countries, let's say like Peru or Chile, let's say, where they have different industries. They may have agricultural industries, they may have mining industries. So if the prices of mining, of raw materials, of commodities drops, they have other sectors that can balance their economy out. But the Caribbean, most of us are tourism-based economies. And again, we made the point, the British Virgin Islands, badly hit by Hurricane Irma and Maria, I think, heavily dependent on financial services, but also tourism. And so our economies are much more vulnerable to shocks than these larger countries, and that we felt that they need to take these into account when they're developing their policies and strategies. So I think that the intervention was positive. I think that it was very interesting to hear what other countries are doing, and there's certainly lessons to be learned from their successes as well as their failures. So, and there will be a follow-up conference, I think, in a year from now. The second topic I'd like to touch on is our hospitality skills training program. As you know, this has morphed, it has changed into our emergency income skills training program. For some reason, when things go into the civil service, we tend to pick on these very technical names. So the program has evolved, and the reason that it's evolved is because we are doing more than just hospitality skills training program. So the program's involved, the scope of it has changed a bit. So just so we don't confuse the two, people still refer to it as the hospitality skills training program. So we are doing a registration drive under NESC, or the National Employment Service Center, or Labor Affairs, has 100 slots available for unemployed people to participate in the skills training program. So the Labor Affairs Department is registering unemployed, so they're going through, obviously, the database that they have of people who've come in and registered for participation in the training program. So once they've selected 100, those individuals will be sent to, those names and applications will be sent to the St. Martin Training Foundation. So that's the entity that is managing the skills training program. And the idea is that these people will then participate. This actually is focused on hospitality, 2 tracks. One is geared towards the culinary arts, so in other words, working in the kitchen area, and the other is more towards basic hospitality skills. So the registrants who participate in the skills training program will receive a stipend as well as medical coverage. So what we noticed in our pilot program is there was a lot of issues created, legal barriers to people maintaining their health insurance. And again, in this time, it's critical that people retain access to health care. And so in our negotiations with World Bank, in terms of how we define the project, it was agreed that all the participants under the skills training program would also receive medical coverage. So for the 100 individuals that participate in the skills training program, they will receive a stipend as well as their medical coverage. There are some requirements. In other words, you have to a minimum attendance, right? And their learning objectives. So you have to work, you have to study. The idea is that you're increasing your employability, that you're increasing your skill set, so that as the hospitality industry starts coming back in line, you're more employable, and that we want you then to move to the normal working sector, the private sector in terms of hospitality work. Those who are interested, I urge you to contact through the Ministry of VSA, the Department of Labor Affairs, express your interest in participation. And again, this is another project under the Ministry of VSA where we really are trying to help those in the community who are most in need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Lee, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, the Honorable Leona Romeo Marlin, to address you. Prime Minister.
Good morning to all, my colleagues, members of the press. Good morning, St. Martin. This morning I have about 4 announcements or reports. The first being the New York UN Security Council hearing. During my visit to the UN Security Council hearing on Haiti, I met with the ambassadors of CARICOM member states accredited to the United Nations. On the agenda was the status of St. Martin's application for associate membership to CARICOM and its relationship with other countries in the region. Addressing the first point was the permanent representative of CARICOM to the United Nations, who indicated that that consideration is still being given to the application of Aruba, Curacao, and St. Martin. The process for membership is being looked at in the context of CARICOM's expansion. During the meeting, I highlighted St. Martin's progress in recovery, including the most recent joining of the CRIF, or the Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, which is a regional catastrophe fund for Caribbean governments to limit the financial impact devastating hurricanes and earthquakes by quickly providing financial liquidity. I also indicated interest in the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, SEDEMA, an interregional network of emergency units in the Caribbean. The ambassadors underscored St. Martin's continued hospitality as home to many of the Caribbean diaspora and the economic importance of the island in the region. They indicated a desire to see greater inclusion of the island in regional organizations. On another note, while in New York, I wrapped up the visit with a meet and greet with the staff of the permanent mission of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to the United Nations. The meeting included a discussion with the Netherlands Foreign Investment Agency, NAFIA, which assists persons looking to conduct business in the Netherlands. The agency is willing to assist St. Martin in identifying investors whose priorities align with those of the country. During the meeting, I indicated the importance of targeted and well-focused investments now during the reconstruction phase and welcomed the assistance from the investment agency. Offers were also made, among others, by the cultural diplomacy arm of the mission to highlight the arts and artists from St. Martin at that mission. This initiative was well received, underscoring the important role that the arts continues to play in St. Martin and the wealth of artists on island and those representing the island abroad. The second announcement is about PSC and the Civil Registry. In keeping with government's commitment to enhance service delivery to its citizens through the concept of e-government, earlier this week, the Public Service Center and the Civil Registry Department launched the online appointment booking service. This form of e-government, which is supported by government's ICT platform, aims to improve efficiency, transparency, and cost of doing business. The online appointment booking initiative, which started a few months ago, deserves the recognition of government's ICT department, the Public Service Center, and the Civil Registry Department, as well as the developer who worked tirelessly realizing this feature. Citizens are encouraged to book their appointments for the various products and services related to the Civil Registry Department at their convenience by visiting appointments.stmartingov.org/services or visit government's website for more information. Additional services of other ministries will be added in the near future, while new e-government initiatives will also be introduced. My third announcement is about the PSS downgrading update. In recent years, the Postal Services St. Martin, NV, or PSS, has found itself in financial difficulty, which has been exacerbated by the passing of Hurricanes Irma and Maria. The current monthly income of PSS is simply not sufficient to cover their monthly expenses. Under these current circumstances, the government of St. Martin has been financially supporting the operations of PSS. And as a result of this unsustainable financial situation, in the month of July, I put together a committee that consists of PSS management, the St. Martin Communication Union, so SMCU, the Cabinet of the Prime Minister, myself, and SWABE. The objective of this committee is to oversee this downsizing and reorganizing of PSS to create a sustainable operation that will continue to carry out its core postal tasks. The concession to provide postal services was given to PSS after St. Martin became a country on October 10, 2010. The government of St. Martin has an obligation by international law and treaties to provide postal services to the public. Considering that the PSS building was destroyed by Hurricanes Irma and Maria, the government of St. Martin has decided to provide PSS with an alternative location in the building that previously housed the Civil Registry Department. This decision will eliminate the current rental payments and reduce the overall monthly expenses of the company. Since its inception, the committee has met regularly and has arrived at the phase where on August 17, the SMCU Union and PSS management presented the downsizing agreements and plans to the employees of PSS. The transition process and the rights of the employees in accordance with the CLA and social plan were explained. The employees received the agreement for downsizing PSS, the transition organizational structure, and the formation plan. The employees were given the opportunity to ask questions, and they were also asked to fill in an inventory form indicating their choice. An appeals committee consisting of 3 independent persons, one chosen by the union, one by management, and one jointly by the 2, were also established for employees who want to contest the decision of management. In the current formation, PSS consists of 23 employees, including management. In its future reorganized structure, PSS will consist of 14 persons, divided over 6 functions that are necessary to provide the core postal services in a sustainable manner. I have requested that the committee conduct the downsizing process in a responsible, legal, and transparent manner. Once the process is completed, we will work with the other individuals to find possible alternative employment. On Friday, I'll be leaving to New York to attend the United Nations General Assembly. The General Assembly is one of the 6 main organs of the United Nations, which marks the opening of the United Nations year. During this high-level week, all political delegates are meeting at the UN, where several events are taking place. As Prime Minister of St. Martin, I will form part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands delegation that includes the Prime Ministers of Aruba and the Netherlands. Together, we will be attending the annual debate of the UN General Assembly and other side events where I will get the opportunity to network with other international leaders and delegates. Lastly, Caribbean OCT Resilience Summit. I am very excited to announce that St. Martin, in collaboration and with the support of the European delegation in Guyana and the European Commission Directorate General of Development Cooperation, will be hosting the upcoming Caribbean Overseas Countries and Territories, OCT's Resilience Summit 2018, with as a theme, Unite, Prepare, Adapt, on Thursday, October 25th, 2018. 12 Caribbean overseas countries and territories, with the Prime Minister of St. Martin as the regional authorizing officer, have received the approval from the European Commission that the European 40 million euros earmarked for the 11th European Development Fund regional program between the Caribbean OCTs will focus on sustainable energy and marine biodiversity with a horizontal component on enhancing resilience to extreme recurrent natural events. The activities have the overall objective to strengthen environmentally sustainable economic development of the Caribbean OCTs and include three components: energy, marine biodiversity, and resilience. Building the resilience to future changes in the Caribbean basin and striving towards a low-carbon economy will continue to sustainable economic development and environmental protection in the Caribbean OCTs. This summit will be held to celebrate the signing of the financing agreement for the 11th EDF Caribbean Regional Program on resilience, sustainable energy, and marine biodiversity, and to highlight the need for a more unified, resilient Caribbean. The 12 Caribbean OCTs invited Anguilla, Aruba, Bonaire, British Virgin Islands, Cayman Islands, Curacao, Montserrat, Saba, St. Bart's, St. Eustatius, Turks and Caicos, and St. Martin. As the organizing committee finalizes its plan, more information will be forthcoming. I thank you and I await your questions.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for your opening remarks. The Minister of Finance is present, however, will not be making any opening statements, but is available for any questions the media may have. We now go on to the question and answer session. Stephen Cerulean of PJ82 Radio, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ministers. Prime Minister, good morning. My question is for the Prime Minister. As it pertains to St. Martin seeking associate membership with CARICOM, what does that mean? What are the requirements for St. Martin being part of CARICOM, and how do you stand to benefit from the body?
Thank you, Stephen Cerulean, with that question. I will first answer. If you listen to the Minister of VSR, Emil Lee, he indicated that he went to a conference and where the Latin countries, basically St. Martin, cannot really identify with some of the problems. But we definitely can identify with most of our CARICOM countries, the problems that they experience there, because we're basically in the same region, same issues that we have, and we have a lot in common than though that is, we have a lot in common. Being a member of CARICOM, I think, well, an associate member, there are various criteria. We are busy negotiating, or we're busy having discussions of such, because of course, we're within the Kingdom of the Netherlands as well. We have a different status than most other countries. So we're busy trying to discuss how we can meet the criteria that they are asking for. So it's still in negotiations, still in discussions. No final decisions has been made, but it's good to see that Aruba and Curacao are also asking for the same associate membership. And I believe that we can benefit, for example, in areas such as SEDEMA. SEDEMA is, and also CRIF. That's also something that we have applied to. Most of the CARICOM countries are part of that as well. But as I said before, we have a lot in common, and we will benefit from being a part of that association.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Lyndon Brown of BCN TV, you have the floor.
Good morning to the people of St. Martin. You're watching. Thank you for paying such an interest in the Council of Ministers meeting, and morning to the ministers. Minister Smith, congratulations for showing great leadership, for apologizing for misunderstanding in your presentation. To Minister Lee, there are some crises in education. I have spoke to some teachers, and you have give preferential treatment for construction workers that want to come to St. Martin. You said in 2 weeks they will get their legal document. Can you also look into this matter for teachers, for artists? There's a lot of people in St. Martin who are versed in different areas, but because of their legal status, they are not advancing.
Lyndon, thank you for your question. First of all, let me be clear. You mentioned preferential treatment. That probably wouldn't be my choice of words. Fact is that when we looked at the construction industry and the importance of rebuilding the economy, and based on the fact that we've done a number of labor drives, job fairs, companies are advertising for workers and not getting response. So based on a series of activities, we found that there's insufficient numbers of construction workers and that anyone in the construction industry should be able to find employment. We agreed on a expedited process, so in other words, a quicker processing time, and also based on the fact that the permits that would be given for this under this incidental permit would not be renewable. So in other words, there's a maximum time period that they would be on the island and then they would have to leave. So I wouldn't call it a preferential treatment. Regarding, and I assume what you're saying is that if there's requests for teachers for work permits, that we also expedite that process. And fact is, if there's requests for medical personnel, teachers, positions like that that are critical to the ongoing functioning of the country, the ministry always tries to expedite those requests.
Thank you, Minister Lee. We now move on to the second round of questions. Stephen Cerulean, you have the floor.
If I may get the attention of the Minister of Finance. We know that there is still an interim president at the Central Bank of Curacao and St. Martin. How close a step are you to, meaning Curacao and St. Martin, to appointing officially a president? And what sort of representation does St. Martin has on the board of the Central Bank?
Thank you, Stephen, for that question. Good morning to all my colleagues and press corps. Good morning, St. Martin. The Central Bank is, let me put it this way, right now we have 2 interim directors on the board of directors. The board of directors comprises of 3 members. The interim vacancy that is still there, that is supposed to be for St. Martin. We had a candidate for that position, and the candidate was vetted, but at a certain point the candidate recused itself, and we are now looking for another candidate. That is one part of it. The other part is that after the predicament that the central bank went through under the management of the former president director, Mr. Trump, the central bank came into a international dynamic of being, how shall I put it nicely, not being looked upon very seriously. So there are a number of issues that that we need to solve. There were some reports with recommendations which have been handled or are being handled at the moment. But the most important part is to have the board of directors in place as soon as possible for to make sure that other facilities that we dearly need, like international correspondent banking facilities, that those pilot projects are being started on Curacao and St. Martin. The issue is that Curacao right now, through the board of let's say the supervisory board, proposed 2 candidates, which are now interim. And I've sent out a letter recently to the supervisory board to propose on behalf of St. Martin also a candidate. And we made it known that the ultimate decision to formally appoint all the 3 board members will have to wait until St. Martin has its candidate also proposed, vetted, and formalized. And that is the status we are in right now. So we just hope that we can present that candidate at the earliest possible convenience. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Heerlings. Lyndon Brown, you have the floor.
Good morning again to the Prime Minister. I will always use the term congratulations for the only woman amongst the ministers. You are a great woman. Congratulations again. Minister, the question is, you mentioned that from the 550 million euro, you said it will be in trenches. How far are we? Is there anywhere visible where we can see any activity from that 500? 500.
580 million US dollars. Indeed, yes, I indicated before in several press briefings that there are tranches. The things that are visible right now, you will see that the training that the minister talked about, the hospitality training, now the emergency skills training project, people are getting funds from that in the sense, in means of stipends. We have started the projects where with the on the dump, where you have persons coming in, doing the assessments there. So things are ongoing. I believe they're within short. You will see some of the replacement of the fire station equipment, police station equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So everything is going as planned. So yes, you will see within short more visible stuff. But again, like I always say, patience, it's virtue, and it's coming.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We now move on to the final round of questions. Stephen Cerulean, you have the floor.
My final question is for the Minister of ECYS. Mr. During your presentation on the floor of Parliament on Friday, you spoke of the challenges that the various schools face. And reconstruction, repairs to schools mainly dominated this segment of your presentation. What sort of a budget, taking into consideration the fact that the repairs are many, what sort of a budget has been set aside to ensure that we realize the repairs to our schools?
Thank you for your question, Stephen. For the public schools, the bidding process for repairs, reconstruction, urgent reconstruction is taking place, and the bidding process should be completed this Friday for 6 of our schools, and the budget allocated for that is 2.4 million guilders. As far as the schools that are part of the private or subsidized school system, some have already done repairs on their own, and we're still trying to access some monies from the trust fund in order to carry out, other repairs. But right now, the budget for public schools that has been that's 2.4 million guilders.
Thank you, Minister Smith. Lyndon Brown, you have the final question.
The final question to the Prime Minister. And the conversation of CARICOM, presently now, there are some Caribbean countries that St. Martin give visa to. In your estimate, your consultation, you think St. Martin is ready for joining the CARICOM? Because right now there are some, like free movement of people. But St. Martin have seen that free movement would not be very good for St. Martin, because there are some national countries that wear visa, and there's a reason why St. Martin give visa. You think in the short term, St. Martin really ready for CARICOM? And if they're really ready, how soon this process will happen?
Thank you, Lyndon. We're not asking for full-fledged membership into CARICOM. We're asking for associate membership. And under the associate membership, you have different arrangements and agreements. Your question about the visa and the free movement of Caribbean people throughout CARICOM, whether we would also accept that, I'm sure that, remember, visa applications or the implementation of visas, that's handled, some is handled by St. Martin, others are handled by the Netherlands. So I'm sure that we would have various type of talks if we have to look at which countries we will allow a visa, which countries we won't allow a visa, and we have to also take into consideration the French side of St. Martin. We're 2 different islands, but 1 island, and we're busy with talks with the French side as well as that for that. But again, we're not looking for full-fledged membership, but an associate membership. And being an associate member, you do not have access and you do not have to join everything. One of the things that we are, that is great assistance, and that goes also to Stephen Cerulean's question when it comes to CARICOM, when we look at impacts, when it comes to security and safety throughout the Caribbean, the trafficking of drugs and the trafficking of persons, being connected with with Impacts the Caribbean, Impacts that falls under CARICOM is something very important and something that's all that are within the Caribbean region should be a part of, because it's about the safety and security of the region and ensuring that who's not supposed to be here on our waters are not there. So again, we're not looking for full-fledged membership, but an associate membership. And under associate membership, there are different agreements.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners, and online viewers, this brings us to the end of the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, September 19th, 2018.